Thank you so much for having me. Can you all hear me okay? Perfect. So writing and producing video is a little different than standing in front of an audience live, so please bear with me, a little bit of nerves here. I did actually consider putting together a blooper reel of all my voiceover mistakes over the last few years, as I thought that could be quite funny, but instead you'll get to experience it live. So let's continue. Now, we've long been told that there's a natural diversity in the way that humans learn. Specifically, we may have learned that there are 4 main learning styles: visual, oral, verbal, and physical. And by making sure to address all of these styles when we're communicating, we can make sure that all of our audience is taken care of. However, recent studies paint a very different picture, and not so simplistic one. One idea that is consistent, however, is that we learn best when information is delivered in multiple formats. Humans are incredibly visual creatures. After all, we existed for thousands of years without any formal written language. Instead, we had to rely on our visual skills to recall things like which berries were poisonous, which situations posed us immediate danger, and who we would continue the species with. Now, the human brain identifies and interprets words and letters individually, before we can even begin to comprehend and recognize them as real-world concepts. And because of this, reading is a rather inefficient process for us. If I were to show you this explanation, how long would it take for you to figure out what this object looks like? In our perceptible time, perhaps seconds. But if I simply showed you this image, the process feels almost instantaneous. And it is for our brains too. When visuals, especially moving ones, are combined with another sense, sound, the likelihood of that information being retained is multiplied. In essence, our brains love video. When I joined a rapidly growing startup back in 2014, we were working with customers that identified as not very technically savvy. So to help them get up and running with our product quickly, we needed friendly, accessible, and engaging documentation. Enter video. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how we can leverage video, what to think about when putting together a video strategy, and my personal process for creating videos. We're all pretty familiar with a step-by-step or a how-to video, but there are huge varieties of scenarios that videos are also perfect for. Feature releases, release notes, getting started videos, best practice videos, advanced techniques and in-depth videos for power users, and videos to help users adopt new behaviors or workflows, like in change management situations. We can also use videos for internal use within the wider company. Or you can even repackage your content for your sales and marketing teams. And this is really great for getting buy-in from the rest of the company, as they can see how videos benefit their department too. So I've broken my production into a 6-step process. Sometimes I do 1 step a day, and other times I do them all at once. But one common question I do see around a video is how long it takes. And from my experience, you're looking at about 2 production hours for every 1 minute of video. During this talk, I will also estimate a time for each step, but these are by no means prescriptive and they will vary video to video. So video can be a really hard sell for some businesses, and it can be time-consuming to make and hard to measure return on. So to get everyone on board with video and to start off really strong, you need to discover where you can add the most measurable impact. So putting together a plan where you can identify, prioritize, and execute video is an ongoing process. However, once you've chosen a specific topic or a problem you're wanting to solve, you're probably looking at about 30 to 45 minutes of research and exploration on that topic. So when putting together a video strategy, you want to identify all of the places where you believe video will add value. If you haven't got a wish list already, which I'm sure most of you do, some characteristics to look out for are any guides that have a lot of nuanced or complex functionality involved, are long, overly detailed, or require people to go through lots of different steps to get what they need, any guides that cover conceptual product knowledge, or any guides that detail how to connect, set up, and work with third parties. My background is in support, so I have a real passion for making sure that third-party documentation helps both customers of us and also the third party as well. I'll show this a little bit later on, but I also have a Trello board that lists every guide in our knowledge base. When appropriate, I apply a video label to any relevant guides, so I can make sure to address that as part of my video strategy. I just want to double check what's on that screen because I think it might be slightly different. Oh no, all good. So As documentarians, we're product experts, so we know how the product works. But support teams and other frontline staff know exactly what problems customers are running into, what questions are coming up frequently, and where the points of contention or confusion are. So going through support conversations will give you really valuable insight into the problems you need to solve. To make that process even easier, you can use a concept called rough tagging, which I believe is an Atlassian concept originally. The R stands for reliability. So you would tag conversations with this that are related to bug and performance issues. Bugs as features, anyone? You would then use the U tag for usability. So this is where our gold is. This is for any confusion, any questions about how a feature or a function works, which is perfect for looking at video. And lastly, we want to tag conversations with F for functionality. This is when a user requests additional functionality or new features from us. Now, when it comes to prioritizing video, you want to focus on the videos that will give you the most return. For us, this was looking at videos that reduce the number of questions or emails our support team received. You also want to factor in your product roadmap. Videos are really great for introducing new features, so penciling in your new releases into your video strategy will prevent you from being blindsided. If you're working in an agile environment, which I've recently been accustomed to, this might mean that your next 60 days could be completely changeable and unpredictable, but having a long-term plan or a map will keep you on the path, even if you have some detours along the way. Now, change in our business is inevitable, which means that videos have a shorter shelf life than we'd ideally like. Personally, I found it not enough of a reason to deter me from making videos, but you do really have to be proactive about prioritizing videos. You don't go picking a feature that you're going to change in a month. I've only ever retired a handful of videos in my 5 years, but due to a streamlined process, I've been able to reshoot and edit portions of videos so that they remained up to date. Now that we've gone through the planning and research process, we can consolidate that into a video structure. We want to define the learning outcome first. What do we want people to learn or be able to achieve by watching the video? Often these problems or questions can't be elegantly solved in a single video, so if you can't define a single goal for the video, you either need to refine it further, or you need to look at producing a series of videos to address each problem individually. It's also a really good idea to think about where that final video will live. Where are you sharing your video, and will dictate the approach, including the content, the length, and the style. Once you have a plan in place, it's time to check in with your customer teams and your product teams and see what they think. Taking the time to do this now will include them in that process and also prevents any questions around why you didn't include or address a feature once the video is delivered. Next, we start on the script. I 100% recommend scripting videos. Even if you don't have the scripted word for word, a detailed outline will save you time, ensure you don't forget anything, and will keep you on track when you're recording. The time it takes to put together a script varies depending on the topic. If I'm basing this on an existing guide, this can take somewhere from 15 to 30 minutes to compose, but if I'm building a script from scratch, combining different guides or bringing new information entirely, this can take closer to an hour. So I have a template here to structure both how the video looks and how the video sounds. And this can change throughout the process, but it's useful to have a guideline to start. If you follow that link at the bottom, I have a link to the template if you would like to use it yourself. So at the top of the script, I create an outline for the video. This includes the title, the format, the length, the difficulty level, and the music. We want to make the title as clear and accurate as possible so we can set expectations and the user knows what they're getting at the end of it. We also want to define the format and work within those limitations. Social media videos, for example, Instagram has 3 different types of videos that you can use, and they each have their own limitations. Generally, viewer engagement on videos drops to about 50% at the 2-minute mark, but we've got quite an engaged user base because they're wanting to get something out of the video, so we usually have a window of about 2 to 5 minutes, which is great. My videos usually range from about 1 minute 45 to about 2 minute 45. Now, beginners have a natural tendency towards videos over power users who come to guides for specific answers. So make sure to tailor your videos specifically for beginners, or think of a different approach for how to get the information for those advanced users. We can then determine if we would like to use background music. Ask yourself what tone you want to set, where you'll get your music from, and will it distract the viewer from what you're saying on the screen. I tend to skip this for how-to videos, but I will use it in more promotional videos where I don't need to give step-by-step instructions. To make my job easier when it comes to recording, I like to divide the video into sections and use a key to indicate what kind of treatment is required. The script is then split into two sides, with video on the left and audio on the right. On the right-hand side, I write the script. I break this into paragraphs so I know where to add pauses when recording and add formatting for emphasis. There are likely to be viewers with visual impairments, so let's make sure that the verbal instructions stand in their own right if they can't see what's happening on the screen. On the left-hand side, I write the corresponding on-screen actions. This includes every click, every selection, and every hover. I will also script any text I have to enter as part of that process and try to be as descriptive as possible so that whoever records this video gets the same outcome if it was up me to do it. Excuse me. Next, we want to do a quick review. And one of the downsides to video is that they can't be easily skimmed. So if you are covering a number of distinct actions or steps in the video, you may want to split the video into sections. You can then post the timestamps for each chapter or section in the video description. Videos are great at establishing and building rapport. This lends video to a more personal and conversational tone than you might use in your regular documentation. I tend to read sections aloud as I write them to make sure that they sound natural to my speaking voice. Now, if you are getting somebody else to help with the voiceover, I'd recommend doing a table read with them a few times before the recording process. This allows them to get familiar with the language that you're using, it sorts out any flow or consistency issues, and it also allows you to change any phrasing that just sounds off when they say it. At this point, I also like to run my final script past the product owner and my manager directly to see what they think. The next stage is one of the most daunting ones, the recording process. And it's going to take some time to get used to speaking and performing on video. You will get used to the sound of your own voice, and it's quite interesting if you come from another country and you watch your accent get slightly weirder and weirder as you go on. But all I can say here is take your time, be patient, and have fun. Video is a really cool thing to get involved with. This will be the longest part initially when getting started with video, but once you get your confidence up, you're going to breeze through this step. I'd look at setting aside at least an hour or so for the recording section. But before we jump directly into the recording process, I wanted to cover a few of the basics that you'll need to make great videos. You'll need a device, like a laptop, iPad, tablet, or even a monitor. Ideally, you want to work with a 16:9 aspect ratio because this is what most browsers use. You also want to keep this crisp and clear quality, so HD is ideal. If you have a Retina machine, then that's even better. But honestly, if you're just getting started, whatever you already have is perfect. You can always evaluate and improve as you go on. You're also going to need a microphone. You can get relatively inexpensive microphones online, and even something like Apple's EarPods or similar will work in a pinch. However, I would avoid using wireless headphones with built-in microphones just as the sound quality isn't as good. If you are going for a higher quality mic, you may also want to look into a pop filter, which will help with the plosive sounds like P's and B's when you're recording, as you can hear in my own microphone. You'll also need some software to record and edit your videos. I use ScreenFlow, but there are endless options available, so what you already have or what you're familiar with is really great. There are lots of low-cost solutions out there, so you don't have to spin the world and get the highest quality stuff. You're also going to need to find a space to record. Think really small room, soft furnishings, no echoes, and keep it really consistent. This is important if you want to make changes to videos later on, as it's really obvious when you record your audio in a different room. You can also go live on webcam to introduce or conclude a video, or you can go live the entire way through the video. I prefer not to do this, just as I have a good resting concentration face, I'll say, as a euphemism. But for this, you want to make sure that you have a neutral background as possible. You're naturally well lit and that you're dressed appropriately. I only add that in for anyone else who works remotely. So I like to record the voiceover first. Now this sets the pace without playing catch up to what I've recorded as a screencast. So I like to run through the actions a few times to get a handle on how long each step would naturally take. I aim to record the entire voiceover in one take, but if I find myself tripping over certain parts of the script, which I definitely do, I will break this up into sections to record. Often you'll come across phrases that just sound really odd or that you want to cut entirely, so record any changes you do make to the original script in a different colour because this will come in handy later on. Now speak really clearly and slightly slower than your normal conversation. Too fast, the viewer won't be able to keep up, and too slow, they're going to be disengaged. Smile when you're reading the script. This sounds really silly, but it makes a huge difference to the warmth and the tone of your voice. Again, just to reiterate, P's, B's, and T's can cause loud pops or plosive sounds on the final audio, which are really hard to edit out. So if you have a pop filter or microphone, then that's great. Otherwise, you can try to soften these sounds, place some material between you and the mic, or you can move further away from the microphone. I also like to try to pause between each line or action, which is really handy when it comes to editing the audio and video together. So when it comes to recording your screen, you'll want to use a test account that looks like a real active account. For privacy reasons, as I'm sure we're all familiar with GDPR, still dealing with it, you may want to avoid showing any identifiable information. There are random user generators that can help with faking some names, but I'm really partial to a Harry Potter character or two. If you want to skip the data input process, you can also use the developer console to amend the names and information. This is also perfect if you want your test account to show different data, statuses, error, or messages that you can't easily achieve in a test account. I then move on to recording the visual aspects. I like to start the recording process first, then play the audio, then jump over to the desktop to record the screencast. You want to perform the actions in time with the audio because this gives our brains the best chance of retaining that information. Some steps are going to take longer on the audio track versus the screencast, so for these situations I like to break up the recording into smaller sections. Then when I'm editing, I can speed up those clips individually so they fit in with the time frame. Brains really love movement and sound. So anything that shows the cursor being moved around the screen will engage your viewer. So try to keep your movements really deliberate so viewers can catch up. I like to draw attention to or highlight a feature during the editing process versus highlighting or circling something on the screen during the screencast. Sorry. The next part is editing. And this can be the most tedious and toughest part of the process. But once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to pick up the speed and improve your workflow. If you've focused your recording time on getting the perfect take in one shot, you'll likely need to spend much less time on editing. But if you recorded the video in sections, your recording time will be faster, but you'll have much more editing to do. I personally like to work with clips and sections as it gives me more control over the final look of the video, and I usually allow at least an hour for editing. If you're feeling really confident and comfortable, you can add transitions and callouts to your videos. Lots of software have these built in, so you don't have to build something from scratch. And to keep things consistent, I stick to using only 2 types of transitions and 2 styles of callouts or highlights, kind of like a designer's rule of not using more than 2 fonts on a design. So I use the dip to wide transition when switching between 2 distinct frames or steps. I'm not entirely sure if that's playing, or the dissolve transition to move subtly between states. When it comes to highlighting on-screen actions, I use the scale feature to zoom in on a specific part of the screen, or the call-out feature to draw attention to one part of the screen and blur out the rest. We then need to add some design elements to the video, like titles, chapters, and outros. This can take the form of an animated introduction or a static title screen. For any chapters or title screens within the video, a centered text heading in your brand font and colors with a simple transition applied is an easy way to keep things looking professional without requiring a design degree. I would recommend getting some input from your design or marketing team on a template that you can use for an animated intro here. Our designer put together an animation for me in After Effects, and then all I needed to do was edit the text in After Effects and render a new introduction for each video. When you're happy with how things look, the next step is to share a copy of the draft video with your support team for feedback. It's a really good litmus test. You can then take on any feedback, make any adjustments, and prepare the final version. The next step is to share the video with your users. I'm going to chat platform, descriptions, and captioning here. Putting together a description and sharing this on whichever platform you do choose would usually take about 30 minutes or less, but if you are wanting to provide captions, this will take a little bit longer. You can do this yourself, which could take up to an hour or so, or outsource this to an external contractor or a service for a fee. So you have two main approaches when looking at where to host your videos. You can go the social media approach like YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, all of which have native video sharing, or you can look at a purpose-built platform like Wistia, Vidyard, VideoPath, or Vimeo Business or Pro accounts. You will likely need to factor in a few things. What is the purpose behind this video? Are you wanting to build a community around the video, or are you just looking for somewhere to host your videos? What can your company actually afford? What is your budget? You also want to know if there are white label or really neutral branding options to make sure that the branding of the platform isn't overtaking your personal brand. You also want to look into whether or not there's advertising. This can be a pro and a con, so it's something to definitely check with your specific company around how you want to approach that. You also want to see how they support lead generation, annotation, and interaction tools, as well as captioning and translation services. The last thing you want to look at is what analytics they offer, and all of them offer something slightly different, so if you do have a trial period for them, I'd recommend jumping in and seeing which ones work best for you. When posting a video, I like to outline the learning outcomes in the description, along with any links to additional resources like guides and documentation. And captioning your videos is a really good idea because it makes them more accessible. It also improves your search performance, and luckily you already have a script already, so you've done most of the hard work there. So you can do this yourself or work with a captioning service. Most tools will have a captioning setting in the app, so you can use those directly. If you follow this link here, I've included some links of handy resources for how those providers do it. The last thing you want to do is to make sure that your customer-facing teams actually know about the video, because they'll be great promoters of it if they actually know that it exists. So the last kind of step I wanted to cover is the review process. And because of the quite time-consuming nature of videos, you really want to ensure that your videos are doing what they're supposed to and that you're getting a return for the time you've invested. There isn't really a specific time allocation for this part of the process, but I think a time frame is a more useful measure. So taking a look at your video performance regularly, fortnightly, or monthly is a really great start, and you'll likely need a period of at least 30 days or so to start collecting that data. In my experience, the metrics that inform you the most about performance show you reach, engagement, and return. So we'll take a closer look at those. First of all, reach. This is about how many people are seeing, viewing, and watching your videos. So this includes how many views there are, the number of plays versus impressions. So this is how many times the video is played versus how many times the video was actually loaded. If you have something like Google Analytics or similar, you can see the bounce rate, the click-through rate, or the time that they're spending on those pages. If you have a call to action or using UTM links in your descriptions, you can track where visitors are going after watching the video. The next thing we'll look at is engagement. And engagement can be shown in a number of different ways. You can measure the average percentage of the video or the average time the viewer has watched. You can also look at how many viewers watched until the end of the video. This could be a number or a percentage. If you're sharing this socially, you can also look at how many likes, shares, or comments the video received. Some tools will also allow you to see how people interact with the video, for example. Wistia does an engagement graph, which shows you at what parts of the video they pause, rewatch, or skip sections of the video. This is really great at helping you to determine the ideal length of video for your audience, for identifying if the video is really described or titled correctly, and also show how interested the viewer was in the content that you've produced. We also want to check back in on our original motives for making video. In our case, a lot of the focus was on ticket deflection, which is quite common, but if you've been taking your support conversations, you can monitor these month to month or week to week to see if you have an increase or decrease in conversations. You can also check in with any customer-facing teams as a good litmus test to see if there's been any change in conversations or feedback regarding the video. If you use documentation or support software that allows you to track ticket deflection on specific guides itself, you can also measure this for guides with videos. I mentioned earlier that I had a process for tracking the videos, and I would definitely recommend putting in place a regular maintenance schedule. This is the Trello board that I mentioned, and I can identify and add dates to video cards for review. And whenever we have bigger features, rearrange or review the UI, I can then review our guides and check for any affected videos. If you do have the opportunity to run some usability testing, then that would be a really great opportunity to review the format and the structure and the tone that you're using. And like anything, there's always room to improve. And as you pick up the pace, you can start exploring more adventurous approaches. So today I've covered just one particular type of video, a really basic screencasting format. In my opinion, these have the lowest cost and barrier to entry for a documentarian, but there are a whole host of other formats that you can try, all with varying pros and cons and requirements. I'm a little short on time today, so I won't go into all of them, but please come chat to me if you're keen to nerd out over video. And because of the time investment in producing video, it's not always the solution to documentation problems. There are also a bunch of amazing alternatives that you can use in documentation instead of videos, talking screenshots, graphs, illustrations, GIFs, and diagrams. These are all really fantastic ways to communicate information visually. So thank you so much for your time.